Hello, and welcome to another episode of Public Safety Insight podcast series sponsored by Samsung Electronics of America. Samsung is committed to supporting public safety and helping first responders to use technology as a force multiplier. I'm Scott Hogue with Public Safety Insight, and today we'll be talking with Sheriff Joe Colston from the Monroe County Missouri Sheriff's Office. The sheriff has served in law enforcement for more than 16 years, and he became sheriff about 2 years ago after having been the chief deputy for several years. Here's why Sheriff Colston is joining us today. His agency is the first in the country to accomplish a full deployment of Samsung DeX in a patrol vehicle and deputy workstations. You're going to hear a little bit more about DeX in just a few minutes, but first let's meet the sheriff. Sheriff, could you take a minute and just tell us a little bit about your county and your agency and sort of where you're at?
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me. Happy to be here. So I'm the sheriff of Monroe County, Missouri. We're located in Northeast Missouri. We are a rural community, farming community of about 680 square miles. The sheriff's office consists of 8 full-time deputies. We do have a few reserve deputies that help with special events, but we service a very rural community. We have Mark Twain Lake here in Monroe County and a lot of farming communities.
Great. You know, I was reading an article recently about you and some of the great things you've done at your office there. After you became sheriff, you introduced some technology to your sheriff's office. Can you tell us about how that happened? How did that come about?
Well, sure. I've been exploring different technologies for several years as chief deputy. It seemed like in the smaller agency, restrictive budget, we were missing out on some opportunities with technology. And a piece of technology that everybody seems to be using every day was obviously cell phones. So we did issue cell phones to each of our full-time employees to utilize in their day-to-day work for communication and for other needs as they arose.
Perfect. That's great. And you've issued these smartphones to your deputies, which I think is sort of the trend, the future in law enforcement, you know, to see as an officer starts their career, an officer and deputy, they're issued a smartphone, they're issued a phone number, they can carry that on throughout their career. You know, we talk about in community engagement and partnering with the community. What a great tool to be able to have your deputies be approachable, someone that can have their phone number, reach out to them and be able to communicate with them. What have been some of the benefits that your deputies have seen being issued these smartphones? And then a secondary to that, you know, we talked about DeX, you know, as I introduced this. Could you talk about what DeX is and how it's working for them?
Sure. On the most basic side of things, issuing the cell phone so that each deputy had their own individual phone number that they could hand out as they were performing their duties. People were able to call and get a hold of the deputy they'd been working with on a case directly, as opposed to trying to call the office and leave a message. So it kind of streamlined just the ability to communicate with the public in that manner. We did also introduce DeX, which has been a game changer for us. So the Samsung DeX is utilizing your smartphone with a workstation, either in the office or in the car. We utilize both currently. You connect your phone to that workstation and it gives you a PC-like experience where our deputies are able to do all of their work through Samsung DeX, including report writing, looking up suspect information, offender information through different apps that we've utilized in Samsung DeX.
Can you talk with us a little bit about, you know, describe the setup in the patrol vehicle and the hardware that's being used? How is that set up?
Sure. So in the patrol vehicles, we were able to utilize a setup from Gamber Johnson that's a touchscreen and a keyboard that's attached to a hub. Samsung DeX then connects to that hub, and it is very similar to having a like a laptop in the car. It's a mobile data terminal. We're able to access our CAD system, see calls for service information in real time. Our deputies are able to access a report management system. They can input report information roadside. There's a in-house message board that we utilize where they're able to communicate things to any of our employees from their mobile data terminal. They even have the ability to run NCIC queries from the DeX system.
Yeah, that's great. Sounds like a great tool and saving some monies. I would assume that you've saved some money by implementing this program.
We have. We in the past have attempted to put mobile data terminals in our patrol vehicles. We have done that through grant funding. We were limited to, at that point in time, just purchasing 2 mobile data terminals. My deputies don't share cars, so not everyone had access to the technology. Obviously, it's vital to have that information at the tip of your fingers when you're out in the community doing your work, going to calls. But it was just cost prohibitive to go the traditional route for us. So with Samsung DeX, we were able to install these systems in our car for a fraction of the cost that it would have cost us to put traditional mobile data terminals in the vehicles. It also was streamlined the process because with a mobile data terminal, we have to think about connectivity and how we're going to reach out and touch the internet with the Samsung DeX system. Obviously, that's a feature that's automatically handled in the phone.
Yeah, so I mean, that sounds pretty simple. So you basically have a dumb terminal that's in the car with a keyboard, and they use the smartphone that they use for a variety of other things to just dock it in there and be able to replace that expensive PC that you've had to purchase in the past. And I would suppose that there's probably additional savings in that you're not having to update those PCs all the time. You just update this smartphone as you would anyways.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we can use the keyboard and the touchscreen that's in there when we upgrade the phone. So we won't necessarily have to upgrade those components all at the same time.
Yeah, that's great. This is really good. So I understand that the smartphones are serving another purpose in your organization, and that's BWC or body worn cameras. Can you tell us a little bit about why you decided to go with body worn cameras and why you decided to use a smartphone in that fashion?
So we had introduced body worn cameras prior to utilizing through the smartphone. It was expensive and cumbersome to download each individual camera, try to locate the film that you wanted and to process it in a way that was efficient. We did partner with a company called Visual Labs that has an application that goes onto the smartphone, uses the camera that's already part of the phone to capture those contacts out in the field through the phone, automatically uploads them to the cloud. And then on the back end, they're easily searchable, very easily transmitted to a prosecutor or attorney as needed to tag and modify. There's geolocation. All that information is collected by the phone and stored in the app and with the video.
That's great. You mentioned Visual Labs. I've heard a lot about them. I've read a lot of articles about them. Can you tell us about your experience with the product? What does it offer that some of the others didn't, and how has that experience been?
So the experience has been really good for us. It was very easy to set up. We had the phones. We had to install the application. They set up our agency on the back end. Using it on the phone is very user-friendly. There are not a lot of buttons for people to get confused with. It's very straightforward and direct. They also offer some features to automatically trigger the camera, which is nice. And then on the back end, the software is kind of really where, from my point of view, you see it shine because it has all that geolocation information. There's just a lot of back end data that you can collect easily searchable. And it was a real simple process to get set up.
It's clear in listening to you talk about the technology, the way you've used the smartphone, that you've effectively leveraged technology as a force multiplier in your agency. And in a smaller organization, the importance of having that information at a deputy's fingertips so he or she can stay out in the field and accomplish a lot of work that maybe they would have had to come back to the department to do. It's amazing. Can you talk about what's next for your organization? You've done some great things here with the body-worn cameras and, the Samsung DeX that we talked about, the desktop experience. What's next?
Well, we're always anxious to see what the possibilities are. And some of the things that we have been looking at is some automation of some of the more mundane tasks where we collect information, filling out forms, having some of the information that we collect automatically go into a form format for different scenarios. That's some things that we have been experimenting with. There's just a host of options out there, and we're just super excited to kind of see what's in store.
Yeah, that's great. So if you're an agency listening to this podcast and they're thinking, the sheriff has implemented a successful smartphone program and you've implemented the other, things we've talked about, what are some recommendations that you have for other law enforcement leaders that are considering new technology?
Well, I would suggest doing some homework on the products that you're looking at. For example, our report management system is a browser-based system, which made it very easy for us to integrate into DeX. Our dispatch center, the CAD vendor that they use, actually have an Android application, which also made it very easy to integrate into our system. So looking at those vendors to make sure that they have a way to integrate into the system that you're going to be using, I think is the first thing, just kind of getting a roadmap set up to avoid any pitfalls. But our experience has been pretty seamless, and we're thankful for that.
Yeah, that's great. One of the things I've learned a lot in my time in law enforcement is, making sure that you put a good roadmap together anytime that you're implementing technology. And I think you've hit on some of the key points, making sure that you have good policy and procedure in place so that when you implement technology like body-worn cameras, the officers know sort of the bounds and what the rules are, when they use them, when they don't, how they use them, that type of thing. Training, is another one that I think is really important, to make sure that the officers are trained on how to use it and sort of what the expectations are. I just think there's just a couple of things that agencies need to be aware of, like you mentioned there.
Yeah, I agree 100%. We are in an environment where, some of our deputies, most of our deputies are very excited about technology. We have found, as we were training them in the basics, when we started explaining some of the back end stuff, they became really interested and really excited. And I think sometimes maybe we don't give them enough information. We're trying to train them how to use it, but when they figure out how the whole puzzle fits together, they get as excited as I do about it.
That's great. And just in closing, I want to go back to this DeX real quick of, when your deputies are using DeX, does this allow them to basically do most everything in their patrol car that they could do at the station? I mean, you've got a fairly good sized county there. Does it allow them to basically do everything out there that they could do in the station?
It does. As a matter of fact, they use DeX in the station as well. We have terminals set up in the patrol room, and they bring their phones in and plug in. They do any reporting they do in the office. They're using the same system.
That's great. So you're saving the money on not only the MDC or the mobile data computer in the car, but also not having to order as many PCs in the office, because the deputies can just take their phone out of their car and they can dock it in the station and use it in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Great cost savings. Well, Sheriff, I just want to say thank you very much for sharing the good work that you've done with the technology and the smartphones. As I mentioned, there's an article that was published about Monroe County, and we will add that to the show notes. And I want to again thank the sheriff for participating, and also thank Samsung for sponsoring this podcast. Until next time, have a great day.